Yo, yo, yo. Welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy podcast, where normally two mental health professionals talk about their journey into the field of mental health and how they take care of their own mental wellness. Lately, because I'm bad at scheduling, it has been a solo show of me slowly trying to not lose my own mind. I appreciate you all coming along for the ride. I do have guests lined up. I just hate scheduling and have sort of taken a pass on it for most of the summer. I will say, tiny peek behind the curtain, because the whole point of the show is that everybody needs help with their mental health. I've been dealing with an injury, and that has not made my summer go well. And I'm not looking for pity or anything. It's an old injury. It's an injury I've ignored for a long time. I'm in PT. My PT is lovely. I hate it, but my actual physical therapist is great. So, shout out to all the physical therapists in addition to the mental health therapists. They probably need therapy too. But yeah, I've been dealing with the shoulder injury, which means way less volleyball for me, way less winning volleyball, which is what I like about competitive sports. Limited on paddleboarding, limited on disc golf. I mean, no disc golf at all summer. So it's been a weird summer. And I have a 12-year-old dog who's acting all peaceful while I record here, but she's got old lady bladder and gets up a couple times a night. So I've also been just sleep deprived for a couple weeks here. And all of that is enough for me to really be bad at the things I'm naturally bad at, which is scheduling. So I have cool guests lined up. I've honestly been flying high off of next week's guest for a month. So I haven't scheduled other guests because I'm so jazzed to have this person who I will have next week. So tune in for that. Genuinely, really cool guest. It's a topic I'm very passionate about. Passionate's a weird word. It's a topic that my neurodivergent brain likes to think about. So special guest next week, not a therapist, but this week it's just me, and I've got a lot of things to get off my chest. I'm 100 episodes in, a little over 100 episodes. What are we doing? What's going on in the world of therapy? It is easy to focus on the world burning because it is, and that's really bad for people's mental health. And that's really bad when people are ignoring that it's happening or lying about it happening or actively participating in it happening. So a lot of the political stuff that I do is really about hey, this harms mental health. If you want to treat mental health, you have to deal with some of these systemic issues as well. But while talking about politics is very draining, especially under a fascist regime with terrible media coverage, is exhausting, I thought I'd take a look closer to home and we would go through what are too many therapists getting wrong. And that's a long list. I could do probably an hour-long episode on some of these topics themselves, but we're going to go through it sort of generally and cover some broad topics. And then, maybe we'll swing back if I hear good things or if I get some therapists on who want to diatribe about these things. For those of you who are regular listeners, it was not that long ago that I had the Emilys on for a rant episode. So, we're frustrated with things as professionals inside the field. So, what are too many therapists getting wrong? First things first, too many therapists are operating as 1099 independent contractors, and they are not independent contractors. They are employees. Now, this is a failing. This is a double therapy failing. So I'm starting with this one because it's just super irritating. And it's something that I didn't learn about until I went through it under a really bad contract situation. And I actually had to talk to an employment lawyer. So asterisk, I, Jeremy, the host of this show, am not a lawyer. But what I'm about to say is stuff that I learned firsthand from working with a lawyer to make sure that I got paid. So independent contractors are generally people who are going to be doing specific amount of work agreed upon in a contract for a set amount of money. So there's some things that just work really well for independent contracting. My media person is an independent contractor because they have to do a bunch of little different stuff for me. And it's very rarely the same. Some of it, like the podcast, has become consistent. But when I first started out, it absolutely was not. And, your plumber might be an independent contractor. Your person redesigning your bathroom might be an independent contractor. There's lots of people who are going to come in, do a specific bit of work. I brought up my media person, like for Pride, I needed some banners made and some stuff. So they just did that and I paid them for that independent contract. Like they don't work for me. We had a contract for a certain price for this certain amount of work. Contract completed. That work is not ongoing. And that ongoing piece is going to be critical here. So the idea, I guess, because it's ludicrous once you see it, the idea, I guess, is that each client a therapist takes on would be an independent case, and that's what the independent contract work is coming from. Is each client is new and different. But that's the thing, is like most therapists are misclassified because they really should be employees. They should be W-2 employees. And I will say the big reason, because a lot of therapists and agencies and things are not making enough money to like do full benefits and insurance, even with having employees properly treated as employees. But you get benefits on the back end. So if you have to leave your job, you're laid off, you get pregnant, whatever, an injury, something happens, you can file for unemployment. You can't if you're an independent contractor. And you have a lot of protections as an employee from things like discrimination, from being let go without cause. And it really protects and cleans up a lot of what could go wrong at a workplace and builds in some accountability. The 1099, the issue is most of these people are being overworked, underpaid, and don't actually have much autonomy. Independent people who will be like, hey, my agency is doing really good. Come work for us. We're like a family. They tend to say, like, you have a lot of freedom. You can set your own schedule. But that's really the only thing you get to set. And like, okay, that's just a perk of being a therapist. Like, we don't have to work 9-to-5 jobs. Most of us don't, because that's not when most of our clients are available, because everybody else in the world is working 9-to-5 jobs. So you have to sort of adjust. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've always had evening hours. It's not my favorite thing. I'd like to be home and see my kids. I'd like to, be able to go hang out with my wife when she's done with work. And so I've cut those hours back the longer I've been in the field. But when I was young, like I was working till 7, 8 o'clock sometimes just to get clients. And then you have this awful split, this, 40, 60, ideally. That's bad, but at least usually I would say ideally as in like that's the starting point split. Look, folks, if you're a new therapist who signed a contract recently as a 1099, that split is not worth it. You're not spending 40% of what you bill on rent and marketing and all those things, especially because most places that hire people as 1099 still make them have their own malpractice insurance, still make them have their own directory listings like Psychology Today or Therapy Den. You're not getting good bang for your buck. And the idea that you get to set your own schedule, yeah, if you open your own place, you could do that too. If you, pretty much the only time you can't do that is if you're working at like a hospital and they're going to pay you better and you're going to get full insurance and benefits. And like, there's a lot of reasons why they say, here's the work schedule. Here's how we're compensating you appropriately for that. So the agencies that hire people as 1099s, even though they should be employees, because these are not independent contracts, these are things that are ongoing work. The expectation is we're going to pay you X amount of money for this continual work, which makes you an employee. Now, under the Biden administration, I was really big on this because they passed a law that was really about like gig economy, like DoorDash drivers and Uber, who were considered independent contractors, even though, and again, that sort of idea of like each ride you pick up is an independent contract, even though that's not really how it works. That's I think the way most people sort of make peace with it, even though that's not at all how it works. They're ongoing employees, but companies like Uber are saving money and liability for themselves and having these people be independent contractors rather than employees, whereas like a taxi company who's paying people as employees has to do all this stuff and like pay into some of the federal or the social safety nets that exist, like unemployment. And so, yeah, it's really not a good system. And the fact that like therapists who should be promoting mental wellness and be doing things with doing no harm, you know, non-maleficence and you know, we should be doing things beneficially. Like that's how our ethics state our client. We're supposed to treat our clients. That should be how we're treating our fellow therapists. And so if you're signed to do a 1099 contract, talk to an employment lawyer. You're probably an employee. If you're hiring people as 1099s, stop doing that. It's bad practice. You're wrong. And it's not a good ethical practice to be treating fellow therapists that way. If you're saying, I support my clients and their part of their social safety net is the work that I do for them, but then you're not paying into something like unemployment benefits, or you're not doing things because you don't want to have to pay into it, then that's shitty of you. You're not helping. Stop doing that. When I sent my contract that I had signed as an independent contractor to my employment lawyer because I hadn't been paid after leaving, long story, not great boss, for a lot of reasons. I only stayed there for 8 months, which was too many. Literally, the employment lawyer I sent the contract to laughed out loud when he saw it, and he was just like, "None of this is enforceable. You would be an employee." And so, you know, therapists' understanding of this is really bad. I see some really terrible takes on Facebook about like, this is how we've always done it, so it's fine. I keep all my clients' information on a notebook on my desk. Like those old therapists who've been doing it for a long time. That was a little ageist. My experience in seeing it on Facebook is the therapists who've been in the field for a long time and are pretty well established think this is like a normal, healthy practice. Like, yo, that's how we got here. Late stage capitalism. Stop treating people who should be employees and have the protections that come with being an employee as independent contractors when they're not. That's a big one. That's pretty ubiquitous in the field. It's really irritating. I have some therapy friends who probably could have done a longer diatribe on this, but the other thing that happens with 1099 is like, your newer therapists, often students or people who are still working their licensure, are getting a really low rate. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's even worse. And again, so like that split is going to the agency, but that agency is not spending, you know, $30 to $75 per session on rent. That agency is not giving you a consultation, or that practice is not giving you a consultation worth that much. That agency is not spending, if you like sit down and do the dollars and cents. Okay. 1099 contracts, very bad. Most therapists are employees. They should be treated thusly. We as therapists in general are real bad at like getting collective action going. There's no reason why we are paid significantly different than psychiatrists, other than big pharma has made it so that medicine costs a lot. So the people who hand out medicine get paid more. And sure, there's some liability there that might exist because taking a foreign substance like a medication or an antipsychotic or whatever could go poorly. But that like gets into insurance in general as a scam. So we have done a very poor job as therapists of not only like fighting for ourselves, but taking collective action. Like strikes work. The idea that nurses can like unionize and strike and get paid better and still be underpaid, right? Shout out to all the nurses out there. Anybody who was necessary to keep working during COVID is probably underpaid. The teachers unions that go on strike, like these things that are collective action, work pretty well. And we as therapists just do not do this. We are, again, really separate. And I say this as somebody who owns my own practice, right? Like we don't come together all that often. What we do is we usually have professional bodies. So I'm a member of the Wisconsin Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I'm a member of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. And we pay our member dues, and some of those dues go to like lobbying efforts so that like, hey, maybe marriage and family therapists should get paid the same as everyone else. Right. And like, that's such a stupid thing to be spending money on, because like, A, duh, B, like we should actually be paying more because we have specialized training. But it's one of those things where like, yeah, it wouldn't take much for therapists to be like, nah, brah, we're not going to work for $60 a session as written in Humana's contract. That probably isn't the going rate right now. I don't know. I'm not paneled with insurance. But that was a going rate when I was taking insurance. And that's terrible. That's a terrible rate. And people are like, therapy is expensive. And then, clients feel like they're having to pay a lot. Insurance companies are trying to like regularly reject therapy as coverage. So we're all getting burned out, taking insurance, and then fighting the insurance companies whose for-profit model is based on declining coverage. That it's a very bad system where like nobody's winning except for the insurance company, which does not need to exist. And so again, this isn't like what's wrong with American medical health system, because a lot, and insurance is most of that. A for-profit model for a necessity to life is a bad system, always. But therapists in particular within the system don't do, like, we don't strike, we don't do collective action. There aren't unions. We have these sort of separate, disparate approaches to professional organizations that don't end up accomplishing a lot. And, I'm sure AAMFT could reach out to me and be like, Jer, WTF guy, thanks for like saying our ethical guidelines are really great, but hey, we're doing a lot for lobbying. Check out our monthly newsletter that says how much lobbying we've done. I was like, yeah, I get that it's not doing nothing. It's doing some things, but it's not collective action by any stretch of the imagination. And again, like a lot of us therapists are dealing with our own shit, dealing with being burnt out. Those of us who are thriving also have kids or other things. Like, to take collective action takes time and energy and money in America. But it wouldn't be crazy to have some sort of organization or to be able to say, hey, no, like we are not going to accept these shitty insurance contracts. And it's just an uneven playing field because of the way that we're licensed and credentialed and split up and siloed out, where like taking collective action is really hard. And I would argue that is on us. I would argue that's not solely on us. Like the system at play does not want, America is not pro-union by any stretch of the imagination, because it's capitalist, which is the people who hold the capital hold the power, not the people who are doing the work. So whatever. This is a theme. All right, next thing. This is a theme that comes up in a lot of episodes, but I'm just hit it real quick here. You've heard it before. You've heard it from nearly every single guest, except for a handful of them who had lovely internship sites and landed in a really great space. We overwork new clinicians, and we put them in these jobs and these sites and these locations to get experience and training that they are not qualified to work in. And then like we just move through them really quick. So, yeah, they come out of school, even if it's not internship sites, they're coming out of school, usually with student loans, right, and debt, and they want to make money. So they're taking a bunch of clients. And a lot of times, again, like grad school teaches you how to do the first 2 sessions, teaches you how to do a diagnosis and treatment plan. And spoiler alert for the rest of the episode, we're going to talk about how many people get diagnosing wrong. So it's one of those things where, again, like we're going to fight for our clients and advocate for them, but then we're going to basically be borderline abusive, if not outright abusive, to new clinicians in the field. And like, it's that sort of like, I see it a lot with athletes, especially older people who are like, well, I was hazed and I turned out fine. Like, I like to abuse the newcomers. Like, no, that's a good sign that you didn't turn out fine and you still have trauma from that. We shouldn't be abusing the newcomers. We should be doing everything we can to support them and help them hit the ground running, not make them have to like go through growing pains that just because we had to go through it, we're going to make the next generation do it too. That's shitty. We need to stop doing that. And hey, like, I don't know, this podcast isn't going to change anything. I'm just putting it out there that like as much as I complain about other things, and like correctly, right? Uh, that yeah, like therapy as a field has its issues too. That's hard to do healing in a broken system. So let's get into some of the less systemic structural issues. I'm a marriage family therapist. I like systemic and structural issues. But let's get into like what therapists are getting wrong in the room. And not all therapists, but too many. Again, topic for today is what are too many therapists getting wrong? First big one is ignoring trauma histories. Trauma isn't niche. It never was, but at 2025, it definitely isn't. We know that everyone's walking around with a trauma history, and there's still too many therapists out there who have no training in anything related to trauma, who are still doing like CBT because not cock and ball torture, you kinksters who listen to the podcast, cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea there is like, yeah, that's what insurance reimburses. So doing that means you shouldn't get rejected very often, which again is a systemic issue. I said I was going to stop talking about how terrible insurance is, but it makes everything worse. But there are people who are doing these modalities of therapy that don't relate to trauma at all. And that's just outdated. We know people have trauma. We know most people have some version of trauma response. And if we're not doing something that addresses the trauma responses that are held in the body, that are biological instincts hardwired into our systems, our body systems, then we're doing bad therapy. You cannot think your way into your kidneys working better because your kidneys are an organ. They do what they're hardwired to do. Same with your brain. Just because we're self-aware mammals doesn't mean we can think our way into our brain working better. It is doing a lot of things on autopilot the way that it is wired to do based on a certain set of circumstances or stimuli. And we know how trauma works, that it is basically instinctual. People are not like, I think my parents are being mean to me. Maybe I'll have a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. It just happens, right? And you learn to manage it, and you can learn to process it. You can find safety, reprocess it, and manage it a lot better, or like manage it completely where it's no longer an issue in your life. But to act like people don't have trauma causes a whole host of issues. I think it leads to client burnout because they're trying to heal and work on things that we're ignoring half, I'll comfortably say half of what's going on inside their body just to focus on their brain. The cognition part of their brain, the part that they're self-aware of, while ignoring all this other stuff that's going on. I think it leads to that deficit model of somehow your brain isn't working the way it's supposed to, which like, again, that happens, right? That's how I diagnose is like, yes, this is something that isn't ideal in our wiring or that our wires are crossed somehow. But it's based on just cognition. Like you're doing this thing wrong. And you need to think better about it for it to go away. And like, that's just not where healing exists. That's not how people are going to get resourced and get through things. So again, I think like ignoring trauma histories in the room is a huge error. I think not having enough training on trauma. We have to take all these ethics classes and continuing ed, but not on trauma. And there's I'm going to say every generation of therapists who isn't, man, a younger millennial, because I didn't learn a lot of trauma in grad school, needs to be getting continuing ed on this stuff or going out of their way to learn about it. Otherwise, they're woefully unprepared for what's in the room with them. And they're doing either not as much good as they could be because they're only treating, again, politely saying half of the issue. I'm going to say most of them are doing harm, right? Like it's not helpful to, I don't know, if someone has a broken leg and you're focused on their posture without correcting their broken leg first, without letting that leg heal. Yeah, they're like limping, they're babying one side of their body because their leg's broken. We need to help them heal from that first. We can't just be like, oh, but your posture is not very good. This topic's not good for my mental health. It will be when the listeners reach out and my fellow therapists who tune in will be like, Jeremy, thanks for saying that. Somebody's got to. And you know, there are too many straight white men, straight presenting white men doing their podcast out here. But we're not going to listen to all the people who've been saying this for generations is because of their sexuality or their gender or their skin color. Guess white people should be calling some of this shit out too, because, you know, authoritarian Christian nationalists are only going to listen to white men because that's in the Bible, he said very sarcastically. Everyone has trauma, not being trained in trauma, not treating the trauma that's in the room with us, not getting a full trauma history. You're just treating symptoms and you're not doing any healing. Another thing that sort of goes along with that, I think certainly with that mindset, is pathologizing normal reactions. I don't know how somebody could be well informed about climate change and not be actively anxious about it. We are living through a mass extinction, and I don't know, like people think comets hit the planet and like they hit all the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were just like organized in a big bullseye dartboard setup, and then a comet came and bullseye and all the dinosaurs died. Like, no, that took many years for there to be, you know, clouds and dust pollution and all the debris up in the air and killing things and changing ecosystems. And then the dinosaurs died. And we are having more species die off right now in our current history than during some of the mass extinctions that we know about throughout the Earth's history. And like, that's wild. And if you're aware of that and you're anxious, that's reasonable. That is your brain working correctly. We don't need to pathologize that. We don't need to say somebody has anxiety about that. That's working correctly. If you're concerned about your neighbors who have been in the States for 25, 35 years and might not have the proper documentation, or they've always had the proper documentation, and then with a snap of the Supreme Court's fingers, they're suddenly here illegally, quote unquote, and you're concerned for them, that's your brain working correctly. If you wake up and hate that you have to take your kid to a school where they're going to do an active shooter drill, that's your brain working correctly, right? Our brain is wired for survival, and a lot of these things are opposite of that. The idea that guns have more rights than children in this country is absurd, and that should be bothersome to your brain. And that you're trying to pretend that it's not is what is making your brain very unhappy, not that you're aware and informed of like, hey, this is unsafe. We shouldn't be doing it this way. We are doing harm. We shouldn't be doing it this way. Yeah, that's our brain working correctly. Now, I think along with this, and where I'm getting into trauma, is like a lot of what I see is people getting diagnosed for a trauma response, or because they're existing under a really heavy-handed oppressive system. If they are a minority, if they are somehow not in a privileged class, whether that's socioeconomic, their ethnic status, their religious status, their sexuality, their gender identity, their gender expression, their relationship status, their age, whatever it is, like, yeah, it's a bad system for all but the extremely wealthy, and everybody else is suffering under that system. And again, we don't need to pathologize those experiences for people who are living under oppression or who have intergenerational trauma living under oppression. Some of these things need a response other than let's medicate or let's self-soothe you into existing in this batshit crazy world so that you can be a good little worker bee. That's not healthy. So, Jeremy, how does this show up, you might be asking? Well, lots of ways, you know, especially working with people who are not in a privileged status, which is most people, again, just on pure socioeconomic status. But the other way I'll say is in how we even do diagnosis, who we've studied to build out those diagnoses, who gets a say in what goes into our diagnostic manual, what insurance is going to reimburse and how much. Again, a lot of the stuff is deficit-based. A lot of it is based off of not great research, or like very thorough research of a not wide swath of humanity is much more of the issue. Too much of our research is just done on college campuses, and that skews white and male. Too much of our research is not done on women in general because their systems are operating differently than men's. They have lots of systems that look a lot like mental health issues that are biological systems. And so, yeah, the pathologizing of normal reactions and then like the lack of research is a big issue. Um, like the amount of research that's just like missing just like women and their menstrual cycle, or like, you know, it came out not that long ago that companies that made tampons weren't using real blood to study their tampons efficacy. Like, that's a really good clear example. Now, like, imagine all of that for mental health for the, you know, 175 years that we've been an organized field. Like, so dumb. So dumb. But the other thing, so yeah, the DSM sucks for a lot of reasons. But one of the big things that I'm hypercritical of and have been pretty outspoken, and not a lot of people are like jumping in line behind me to agree, is I don't think personality disorders exist. I feel really confident in this, actually. I think they're a bad grouping of diagnosis. I think it's a constellation, it's a cluster of symptoms that is stigmatizing and puts a label on people and isn't actually highlighting anything that can be fixed. Like, the treatment for personality disorder is to rebuild that person's personality. What the fuck does that mean? How far up your own ass do you have to be as a therapist to think, I'm going to rebuild this person's personality from the ground up? Hooray me. Fuck all the way off. It's lovely that I'm not sponsored, so I can talk like this. If any of you therapists are out there like, but Jeremy, we're not supposed to talk poorly about our fellow therapists. Like, yes, that's a dumb rule, right? Like, where is accountability coming from? Our clients, who are, again, living under oppressive systems that therapists are propagating by being like, I'm the expert and I'm not gonna, you know, accept your rationale for this. I think it's this, right? Like, no, clients aren't holding therapists accountable. We therapists need to be holding ourselves accountable. Nobody understands accountability. This is my take as a religious trauma therapist. But yeah, personality disorders are almost always trauma. And I would say for the people who have maybe worked in like settings where they've come across high degrees of personality disorders and or like criminal behavior, mass murderers, serial killers, people who have some of that stuff. Again, I'm gonna guess, this is a guess, it's an educated guess. A lot of that stuff has to do with not just trauma as like lived experience, but like biological brain trauma. What do people do with extensive brain damage? They kill each other and themselves. What is going to happen as a generation of people who grew up with CTE in the NFL, the NHL, most of the sports leagues that weren't doing anything about concussions other than covering it up? Like, yeah, we're going to have suicides and we're going to have, you know, unsafe behavior. We see some of this stuff live. Like, Antonio Brown is different now than he was before the big Vontaze Burfict concussion hit. Like, I don't know. I think Aaron Rodgers pre-2018, post-2018, when he had potentially like 4 concussions in a season, different dude. Not saying he didn't have issues, saying your brain deteriorating because of blunt force trauma changes how you respond to things. What's his name? Fetterman, or politician. Again, like, yes, trauma changes things in our biological systems, but also like a brain injury changes how our brain works. Duh. But you can't like scan that. We could in some cases, and we don't, because it's cost prohibitive, because those insurance companies need to make their money, and hospital shareholders who shouldn't exist at all but somehow do, you know, they got to make their profits. So we can't just be like testing people to see if there's something wrong physically in their brain. And even if we could, a lot of it wouldn't be stuff we could pick up until we can dig into their brain, which is really something we shouldn't be doing unless we need to. And oftentimes something we're only able to do after someone dies. And so again, some of this stuff is, every psychology student studies the guy who had a railroad stake driven up through his head and survived, but his personality totally changed. Like, this is a fairly famous case that most of us study. And a lot of our clients are walking around with like head traumas of some form or fashion. I see a lot of athletes, former athletes, like, this is a fairly known concept. What to do about concussions is still a bit of a mystery, again, because a lot of money has gone into either preventing them or getting people back on the field, not like long-term effects. We don't have a ton of longitudinal studies on those. So yeah, all that is to say, we got rid of access to, which used to be the personality disorder access, which is the thing that everybody had to diagnose. And you could say like no diagnosis on the access, but we still kept the personality disorders, which I don't think should be a thing. I think it's trauma as we understand like complex PTSD or just what's in the DSM, which is PTSD, but also blunt force trauma. And that might be a bad car accident, that might be falling down and hitting our head, that might be getting tackled in football, or, you know, our dog headbutting us because they got overexcited, like whatever that might look like, that like, yeah, there's some of that stuff. But like childhood trauma is probably a big piece of that. And some of that happens before people have functional memory. So we as therapists can always dig in with talk therapy and be like, what happened in your childhood that made you want to murder everybody else? Like, well, I don't know. You got several concussions as a child and your parents were outright abusive. Like, I don't know. Is that a personality disorder or is that trauma? Trauma, right? Ugh. That gets into, I would say, that shifts us into one of the other things that I think happens in the room a lot is over-reliance on structured or manualized treatment. I think a lot of therapists are dealing with their own shit, specifically imposter syndrome. It's a thing I deal with occasionally, often, maybe not often, once a month at least. I sort of have one of those days where I'm like, why the fuck does anybody listen to me? What do I know that is helpful to anyone? Because sometimes that's what it's like when you're trying to help other humans. But it's, yeah, like old school CBT. You know, I liked some of like Albert Ellis's stuff, you know, back when I was studying school, and like some of that stuff's just really, really manualized. Carl Whitaker is like a big name in the family therapy. And like, I think what a lot of those quote unquote experts from back in the day did is not replicatable, because some of it is, again, most of it in the therapy room is the relationship you build with your clients. And so if you're jumping into like following your scripted motivational interviewing script, or you're doing like really heavily structured EMDR, which like EMDR is not my favorite, and I'm friends with a lot of EMDR therapists. And it's not my favorite because a lot of clients don't like it. A lot of clients don't benefit from it. And I think when that's what you get used to doing and you're very convinced that it works really well, it turns into this idea that, again, the client is doing something bad or wrong since it didn't work for them. And I think what I grew up with in school, certainly, and what a lot of therapists, I think, did, based on, you know, over 100 episodes in, lots of interviews with other therapists here, most of us are taught that like being an eclectic therapist isn't good. We're supposed to pick one school of thought and we're supposed to get really good at that form of therapy. I just don't think that's human. You know, like if we boil it down to a lot of science, a lot of research we have on like what makes people better, what makes their mental health better, a good relationship with their therapist is the number one factor in therapy. But like exercise and proper hydration goes a long way in improving people's mental health. And yeah, a lot of other like systemic changes in our culture and our society would also go a long way in improving people's mental health. So yeah, I think like the manualized treatment misses a lot of that. I think it makes us less human, and I think it puts a lot of the onus on clients to do the work to get better. Which is, you know, at the end of the day, it's the thing that I talk about with clients too. Like if I, as a therapist, am the person who's working hardest in the room, therapy won't work. Like clients have to be invested in their own process and have to do some of the work outside of the room. There is no therapist who's so good at their job that they're just going to like fix it for you. But I do think that's some of the promise of the manualized stuff. And I think there are lots of therapists who do things like IFS and EMDR and TBT, CBT, lots of things that they could go way overboard and being really rigid and structured. And I don't think that's the way that those things help and are healing. I think that's what a lot of new therapists rely on. And I think that's what some therapists who have been in the field for a long time and are like dealing with burnout and like go to a new training and they fall in love with therapy again, but then they're really reliant on it. So like there are all these different ways that this can pop up. But I think it takes the humanness out of the room, both for the client and for the therapist, which I would argue isn't helpful. Not saying don't have a script or don't follow a manual, but like it can't be so rigid that we're missing the person sitting across from us. Um, I don't know how many minutes I've been recording. Um, some other things that I sort of just jotted down. I didn't take notes, but I try and organize my thoughts sometimes. Are things I think I've talked about before. The flip side of like being too rigid is I think doing nothing. Blank slate, the psychodynamic approach. This was Freud's idea, even though Freud was just projecting all his own shit onto all his clients. While high as a kite on his little cocaine, just chain smoking cigars after doing a bump of coke before a session. Wild times from a guy who was in love with his stepmom. Not in love, just lusting after her. We aren't blank slates, and it ignores a ton of research and what we know about the human brain to suggest that we are even capable of that. Um, obviously, I think therapists need to be aware of oversharing or making therapy about them. That's not helpful. But the response isn't to ignore that you're human and you have your own shit too. A lot of my self-disclosure is around something like neurodivergence, which is one of the things I specialize in, to let people know, like, yeah, this is hard. It's hard to manage this. It's hard to get this right all the time. That cannot be the only status of success, is getting it right all the time. I do this stuff professionally. I've been doing it for 16 years and I still get it wrong. So a lot of my self-disclosures around stuff like that, because I think it normalizes not just that other people experience this, but like the quote unquote expert also experiences it and still has to work on it. And I think that's really helpful. I think the blank slate thing ignores things like implicit biases. Low-key, it wasn't on purpose. Lots and lots of asterisks here before I share this story. It wasn't on purpose. I'm not running tests on my clients. All my clients who are tuning in, ears just perked up. I put out new comic books or books that I'm reading on my coffee table in my office about once a month. Depends on how much I've been reading and if I think clients would find it interesting or not. Often it's comics as sort of a way to lighten sort of things, or be like, oh, Godzilla, or like, who's this comic book character that I've never heard of? Like, oh, let me tell you, it's great small talk before we all get settled or somebody's in the bathroom or whatever. Like, I like to have some stuff out. I have my standard coffee book Fair, which is an illustrated edition of the epic poem Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is what I have a tattoo of because it's a great poem. Don't be mindless, and certainly don't kill animals in your mindlessness. I have The Medium is the Massage by Marshall McLuhan, which is a great look at media and how it impacts our messaging. And like, right, like, so this gets into implicit biases. Whatever. I'm not going to go off on Marshall McLuhan. Read the book. It's good. Shoot, what's my other coffee? Oh, and I have a Pink Floyd coffee table book. So I have my standard coffee table books, and then I put out something new, right? In 2024, there was a graphic novel called In Perpetuity that came out. It is a fantastic little tale, a retelling of a lot of old Greek mythology in a modern setting. Basically, this guy dies and he goes to the afterlife, and he's just working a gas station job, and like, the afterlife sucks. And it's lovely and it's really great. And it's one of my favorite graphic novels of 2024. And in the month that this was sitting on my coffee table, the phrase in perpetuity started getting used at a degree to which it had never been used in my 16 years of doing therapy. Subconsciously, clients seeing it on my little coffee table kept using this phrase throughout our normal conversations. And I would say a handful of times, maybe. I see a lot of like high functioning, twice exceptional folks in my work. Neurodivergent brains find each other. So it's not like such a weird phrase that people would never use it, but pretty rarely. And then I'm going to say close to once a day, but multiple times a week, clients were just slipping in the phrase in perpetuity, and like not on purpose. And I know it wasn't on purpose. And again, I promise I'm not testing my clients. This was a happy coincidence for me to discover. Is I would usually point to the book with like a shit-eating grin on my face, like, I see what you did there, referencing the book. And they'd be like, oh, I didn't even see that. And so again, long story short, humans are not capable of being blank slates because we have all these implicit biases going on all the time. The blank slate idea was always a fabrication. It was how Freud tried to pretend he was an expert when really he just wanted to bang his stepmom and most of his clients. And he was high and a drug abuser and didn't have shit figured out. But because he was a white dude, people listened to him. That's oversimplifying things just a touch, but not that much. And I think, that blank slate comes into a lot of different spaces. I talked about before, like ignoring trauma. I think like, yeah, we're not going to assume things about our clients. Let's assume most people are traumatized. I think that shows up as neutrality as a virtue, where therapists are like, therapy is not political. The fuck it's not. I've talked about that before. I'm not going to get into it. There's a whole episode about it. I believe that was with Lily Risch, so she's great, and we talk about it. But it's this idea of like, I'm not going to take a stance on these things because I don't want to like weigh in or like affect my clients. But like, hey, if you're like, I'm gonna not take a stance against fascism because what if one of my clients is a fascist? Like, great, then they can go find a therapist who is overtly a fascist. They're Christians. They're at Christian counseling places. They've been in the Lord's army for a long time. They're pro-fascist. And being a little tongue-in-cheek there because religious trauma work that I do. But again, I think it's one of those things where it's ignoring that like these things come through anyway. And if you talk about it, if you own it, if you name it, then you can do something with it in session, which can be really healing for a lot of clients. And again, the point is not to make it about yourself. You're not just like trauma dumping on clients, and you're not just like taking up all their time to talk about comic books, but you are showing up as a human. And that relationship, because the therapy relationship is very unique and in a way structured that other relationships aren't, you can work through that stuff in a very unique way that oftentimes leads to healing or new innovation. I think the blank slate therapists, and like this is where imposter syndrome comes up. Like, I'm like, gosh, am I overdiagnosing people with ADHD? Like, are there that many bad clinicians out there who've missed this stuff? Or this many doctors who are bad at this stuff? Like, and cognitively, intellectually, I know the answer to that question is yes. But when you're working with something all day, most days of the week, and you're like, man, I just keep seeing this everywhere. It's like, well, right, because I've done a lot of work to market to that audience, and those people find me and I find them. I appeal to them. And so if you're a blank slate, I think you're missing your target audience. And I think like, again, people want to know where their therapists stand on some things. If I'm LGBTQ plus and looking for a new therapist, I want to know that my therapist isn't neutral on that. That's not a niche modality. That's basic human decency. Neurodivergent clients, I'm pretty adamant at this point in my career that like therapists who don't have ADHD are doing some low-key harm. The reason I'm doing this episode today is because I was listening to a podcast that I honestly like a lot. I think most of their stuff, it's a medical podcast. It's kind of dry. But I think most of their stuff is really great. They had a psychiatrist on to talk about adult ADHD, and 90% of what he said was really great. And then 10% of what he said was really awful, deficit-based, old, outdated bullshit about ADHD that I know if he had it, he wouldn't say. And so again, it's just one of those things where like, then I go back and forth on like, should I be treating people with anxiety? Should I be treating people with depression? I don't have anxiety. I've lived through some bouts of depression, circumstantially. But it's one of those things where like, I do think neurodivergence is something that people are undereducated about. I think it's really hard to say therapists who don't have it need to read X, Y, and Z book because those books haven't been written yet. Like the research is woefully inadequate and behind on it. And so it's one of those things where I don't think you need to have it, but I think you have to go out of your way to be really well informed on it. I think people who have it also need to be informed on it, but like it does provide a different perspective. So I don't know. I see this with like Gosh, I wasn't going to do this topic because I'm at my limit here. I'm not. I just recorded a 90-minute YouTube video about wrestling 2 weeks ago. Um, there are certain things that aren't niche topics. Again, trauma isn't one. I don't think neurodivergence should be one, but like, fine, that is probably a smaller percentage of the population that is traumatized. I don't think LGBTQ plus competency is niche. It shouldn't be. I don't think kink affirming care should be niche. Like, I think people are uninformed on these things, and again, the structures that be are harmful. They're old, outdated models of things. Like, I don't think you need to be a sex therapist. I don't think you need to be ASECT certified. That's the big board of sex therapists, to know that sex addiction isn't a thing, to know that porn addiction isn't a thing. And if you're posting on one of these Facebook groups about therapy, which the Southeast Wisconsin Therapy Facebook group gets one of these posts, I don't know, every once in a while. There are like 5 of us who just copy and pasted the ASECT stance on like, sex addiction isn't a thing. Neither is pornography. Get educated and refer this client out because you can't help them because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It doesn't swear at them. But again, it's just one of those things where it's like, man, I feel like that's really basic. When I sit through these trainings that I'm required to do on ethics, and a therapist who's of a different age bracket than me says a like very basic ask question, like, well, I keep all my clients on this notebook in my desk. And it's like, yo, that's not legal. You gotta lock that up. And it's therapy, so you have to lock it up twice. And that's just like basic. Like, why am I sitting in the same ethics class as this person who has apparently been practicing therapy with some illegal ass shit going on for a long time? So yeah, some of these like basic human decency things that are treated as if they're a niche or they're a special competency, when it's like, no, these are just people. These are people in your office, and you don't know about this stuff, then you shouldn't be seeing people. These things are too ubiquitous for you to not know about it, right? Like, I'm not an immigration specialist. In our time and place, I've learned a lot more about it and how to help people. But a lot of that, how I'm helpful, is referring people to people who have that specialty and that expertise, right? Like, I grew up in America. I learned English and I studied Latin because I thought I was gonna be a doctor. And then I took Finnish. Like, these are not good skills. I'm not being a good therapist. I seem like feeling bad and having to defend myself on why I'm not an expert on this thing. Like, we can't be experts on everything. That's true. We should have certain specialties and practice within our scope of practice. But some things are not specialized. Human sexuality is not a specialized thing, right? Like, that should be a core competency that we all have. Trauma is not a specialized thing. It should be a core competency we all have. Ugh. Therapist, get your shit together. Yeah, it's probably enough, huh? I feel great. That's sarcasm. Yeah, we need to be better as a field. I think we need to be better about holding each other accountable, holding ourselves accountable. We put all of that onus on clients who are already working on a lot of shit. We need to hold systems. We need to fight back against the systems because so many of us are bad at, I'm not making excuses. Some people are bad at this shit because they're exhausted and they're struggling to make ends meet and they're burnt out and they're seeing way too many clients with way too little pay because they're working a shitty 1099 contract, or, you know, Blue Cross Blue Shield or Humana or UHC or whomever it is cutting their benefits, or, you know, whatever their reimbursement rate. Like, there's lots of reasons why therapists aren't on their optimal functioning to do some of this stuff better. It's all very complicated web. But we need to be doing it better, and we need to, you know, I think a lot of that starts with education. Several people I went through grad school with who should not have either graduated or been allowed to be therapists. I say this pretty regularly. The dumbest person I've ever met in my entire life was in my master's program with me, and they went on to get their PhD successfully. And you're like, hey, maybe you shouldn't say that. What if they listen? I'm like, I'm not worried about that, because there's honestly nothing going on behind their eyeballs where they would even think, could he be talking about me? So, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot that needs to be overhauled and reformed, like capitalism would be a great place to start. But in these other ways too, we as therapists need to be better. Stop being shitty therapists. You're doing harm to people who are coming in and looking for help. All right, that's it. That's what I got this week. Next week, I have a special guest that I'm jazzed for. That's gonna be another long episode, probably. Please tune in. I'm excited. Thanks for listening. I have guests lined up, I promise. If you're a therapist, you want to be on the podcast, let me know and just send me a date because I hate scheduling. So let's skip the hard part. But no, I will get back into regular programming here shortly with guests and the interview style y'all have come to know and love. I just am tired over the summer and I'm missing a lot of my personal mental health stuff. So it's been hard to be optimally functional, which shouldn't be a status we strive for. But soon we're back to regularly scheduled programming. School year's way easier too because my schedule's more consistent. It is what it is, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe. What is this, a podcast? Not YouTube. I guess you can't like it. Maybe you can like it. Leave me a review. I think that's a thing that I don't talk about enough. Leave those reviews. That helps people find me because we're all beholden to our algorithmic internet overlords. All right, take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.